All right, so now we're going to discuss how to find data. And I'm going to do this in one moment. First, what we're going to do is have to create a bunch of data so we can work with. So let's go ahead and create a variable called toSave. And it's going to be an array of objects where we can specify name and email. And so I'm going to copy this a bunch. We're going to make some changes to some of the data just so we can really see what's getting returned from the database. All right, so we've got these. Let's change the email address. Just a bunch of random stuff, I guess. All right. That will give us some data where some of the objects are similar to others, and we can really see in which way that we can get the data. So now we need to actually save all of these. So to do this, I'm just going to say toSave.map. And we're just going to capture object. And so for each of these objects, we're going to say models.profile.create object and error and created. In the callback function, we're going to console log created. What did we name that? We named it created. All right. So now let's save this. And let's run the script. There we go. So we've got all of these created. And in the database, I can refresh. We've got 16 items, and this is going to be perfect to work with. So now we can actually just comment all of this out, I guess. And now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about finding data. So we've already learned the find or create method. We won't be focusing on that. We're going to mainly focus on the find and the find one methods. So let's go ahead and write models.profile.find1. And now we want to find one where something exists. So in the find methods, we can see highlighted here with Visual Studio that it's trying to accept a filter. So the filter is an object, and the shape of it is basically this, where this is, let me create a variable called filter, actually. There we go. So where this is going to be kind of like MySQL where clause. All right. So we've got where, we've got order, and this is going to be how to order the data. So we can either order by ID ascending or ID descending. We can order by dates if there's a date in there. in the objects, and we can also specify by ascending or descending. So I guess think of the first word in the string as the property of the model that you want to order by, and the second word will be in which direction you want to order it. All right. We've got a limit property, which basically is how many you want to return. So in a find one method, this won't really apply. It's going to return 1 or 0. However, in a, if we're looking for, more than one instance, but we want to limit it to 2 or 3, we would put that here. So there's where, order, limit. What else are we missing? Scope. So there's, well, let's not worry about that right now. Basically, if you're querying by a related model, then you would use scope, which would specify all of these, and we'll discuss that in a moment. The next one that we really can't demonstrate right now is include. And this can be either a string, an array of strings or objects, or an object. So I know that sounds confusing. It's really not. Just think about how many include levels deep you want to go. So if there's one related model, which let's say is user, we would include and just pass in a string user. However, let's say the profile model has 3 different related models that we want to include. So let's say user, let's say posts as well. Let's say the profile has a bunch of posts created under it. We are going to use an array to specify these relations. Now, let's say that also posts has images related to it that we want to include. So we want to include, and again, we're looking in the profile model, we want to include all of the posts of the the profile basically, but then also we want to include those posts related models of image. So how we'll do that, and we can either do it right here or as a top level basically, we're going to change this to an object. And so the way this is going to work is we're going to specify, so in this instance it's top level, so profile dot, it's going to be posts. So we're going to include profile.posts, but also we want the posts children. So it's going to be an object, and the children of the posts is going to be image. So this will return, for example, profile.posts.post, or rather, .image. We will now have access to that using this. Now we'll also have access to that. I'm going to copy this. If we just write this. Now, alternatively, we can include, so you see this filter object, right? We can specify where or order, limit, etc. Let's say that we wanted to only include images for the post where where something, basically. Or let's say we want to limit it. So in that instance, what we would do, let's erase this. We're going to open up an object. I'm actually going to skip down a line. And now instead of using the key value as the name of the relation and then the related relations, we're going to say relation equals post. And now in this way, let's say that we only want posts, let's say we want to limit the posts. what we will do here in this instance is we will create a scope property. And now the scope property is basically a filter property for this relation. So let's say we only want to include posts where date is greater than or less than. And we'll talk more about the where filter a little bit later. Let's say we just want to limit it to 5. And we want to order by date descending. So what this will do is this will get the 5 most recent posts created by this profile or this user, and it will list them in order of newness to oldness. So the newest one will show up first in the array. And now what we need to do to get the image back in there is we now need to put the include within the scope here. And we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to open up an object here and type relation equals image. And now we can specify a limit of 1. Or where type is equal to banner or something, or thumbnail, This would make sense if we were trying to list this person's posts out on their profile page. So we're going to get the 5 most recent. We're going to also include the images of the posts. We're going to limit it to 1 because we just want 1, and we just want the thumbnail to be able to show a grid. And so that's a little bit of this filter here. So how to include. So it's very free form. You can do it in a few different ways. And right now this will return nothing because I don't actually have any posts created. But we'll move on to that. And you can also use these filter objects inside of API requests. So when we actually hit the server with a URL, we can use this type of object to specify what the endpoint will return. So now with all of that said and done, I'm going to include or delete that include there. I'm going to save this. And so let's come back down to our find one method. And we want to say where something equals true. So in this instance, if we look up at the data here, we're going to want to find where name equals Nick. And so what we'll do is we'll say where, then we'll open the object, and this is kind of the shape of the object that we want to find. So in profiles, there's a property called name, and we're going to say name equals Nick. And then we're going to say error or found in the callback function. And we're going to console log found with error or found. So let's save this. And then in terminal, I'm going to clear this. I'm going to run the script again. And we'll see that it found this object here, which has an ID of F1C2, the last 4 digits. So if we look in here, we can see that it found the first instance, where there are other instances of Nick that were found. For instance, this one. So where we say find one, it begins at the beginning of the database collection, basically. And it will look through each one until it finds one. So it will always find the first one. Now, let's say we want to find the last instance. What we can do is after the where clause, we can say order, and we're going to order by ID descending. We're going to save. And now when I run the script again, we'll see it found one with ID EDEA. So going back here to my database, we can see that EDEA is about this one. And this is the last instance of a profile where the name equals Nick. And so that's how we can use the order scope as well. Now, let's say we want to find a lot. So I'm going to change this from find one to just find. The rest of the statement will stay the same. And with the current where and order scopes, we'll see a few different instances returned, but they will be ordered by most recent first. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to run this again. And we'll see EDEA, which we have confirmed as the last instance of that. EDE8, which is this one. And then EDE6, which is this one. And then also the first one. And it has ordered them by most recent. So you don't really need a date property. You can use the ID. The way that the IDs are set, they're auto-incrementing. So yeah, if you're just worried about most recent and whatnot, that's how to do it. So now let's talk about specifically the where filter. So this can do a lot of cool things, and I will post the link to the loopback documentation for this where filter because it kind of shows like a grid, and then you can basically use it. It makes a lot of sense. But what we're going to talk about is the different ways that we can match properties. So we've already learned the raw, key val. So name is equal to Nick. Now this will find names. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this will find names that equal this. It's case sensitive. It needs to match this exactly in order to find it. Now, what we can do instead, and let me change this, because we're going to actually use this filter in this call, so that when we make changes there, it will update these. So let's just specify filter. There we go. So right now, it's going to find any objects where the name equals Nick. The output is essentially the same as it was last time, except in the other order. And we can see it found Nick, Nick, and Nick. Good stuff. And this, when you're using the find, even if you limit it to 1, it will return an array of objects. If you just want a single object, not in an array, you would use find 1. Now, we can do something else with this. We can apply modifiers to the way it matches the data. And so in this instance, let's say we want to find, I'm going to set the limit to 10 just so it finds a bunch. We're going to set name to an object, and then we can use an operator here. So like. So now it's going to find objects where name is like Nick. Let's go ahead and save this and see what it returns. As you can see, it has returned Nick, Nick1, Nick2, and so we can kind of see how that matching is done. Now the same is true for email. Let's go ahead and write email is like Nick, lowercase. Let's save this and then rerun the script, and we'll see that it found everything where the term Nick exists within the email. So it's only looking if it's inside of it. Now, if we were talking about dates, we can use greater than or less than, or if we're talking about numbers. So let's assume that each property had a post count. or each profile had a post count, we could say we only want to find every profile where the email is like Nick that has more than 10 posts. What we can say is post count is greater than or equal to, we'll say 10. And what this will do is it will look through all objects that match this and this. So you can also do less than or equal to. You can just do less than or greater than. And you basically just put the filter inside of the find function when you're finding data. And that's really it for this video. There is a lot more to the where clause with what you can do with it. And so that's why I'm going to also post the link to the loopback documentation for this video. And you guys can have a look. It should all make sense now that we've discussed, the different ways that we can manipulate the find method. But if nothing makes sense, just leave a comment and we'll try and get you sorted out.